Hello, beautiful souls. I'm Shiri, and welcome to the very first episode of the Aligned in Action podcast. I am so excited to finally be here and do this, just to share a space where we'll be diving deep into identity transformation, smart training, intelligent nutrition, and creating a life that feels truly aligned with who you're meant to be. Now, before we get into today's topic, I want to take a moment to talk about why I created this podcast. I know how hard it is to find spaces where we can talk about both the practical and the deeper, more spiritual even aspects of transformation. There are so many podcasts that focus on training, nutrition, habits, but rarely do we discuss the real foundation, which is the shift in identity that makes all of these strategies and all of these tools actually work and stick. I wanted to create a space where ambitious women like you, like me, can have conversations about heavy lifting as well as identity shifting, right, in the same breath. A space where we talk about body transformation and personal evolution side by side, because the truth is they are deeply connected. This podcast is for the woman who is already putting in the work but knows there is another level waiting for her. Maybe you're training consistently, eating well, doing well in your career or business, but something still feels incomplete. You can't shake this feeling that you're meant for more, that there is a higher version of you waiting to emerge. And what I want to tell you today is that this feeling is not a sign that you are failing. It's a sign that you're evolving. And that evolution requires something deeper than just doing more of what you're already doing. So, a little bit about me. How do I even start describing what I do? I wear so many hats. I'm a health, fitness, life, mindset, strength, empowerment, transformation coach for women. And I help ambition women create their dream bodies and their dream lives through a unique combination of identity work, mindset, self development, intelligent nutrition, and my strength fusion training method. I'm also a PhD candidate and a mom to a toddler, so I fully understand what it means to juggle multiple responsibilities while still pushing yourself to grow. And I've learned that it's not enough to just add more strategies or more routines into your life. The real shift happens when you start seeing yourself in a completely different way. And that's exactly what we're going to be talking about today. Because the missing piece in most transformation journeys is identity. And if you don't shift the way you see yourself, no matter how much action you take, you'll always feel like you're forcing yourself to become something that doesn't feel like you, and you'll always just end up failing and going back to previous habits and previous routines. So let me ask you something. Have you ever looked at your life and thought, things are good, I'm doing the right things, I should be happy, but something still feels off? Maybe you've been training consistently, eating well, succeeding in work and business, but when you look in the mirror, you feel like you haven't fully stepped into the woman you know you're meant to be. And I'm talking physical as well as mental, emotional, anything at all, right? I see this all the time with my clients. They come to me saying they feel stuck, but when we break it down, they're already doing a lot of the things right. A lot of them are already disciplined, they're focused. A lot of them have the habits in place, or at least know what habits they should have in place, but they don't feel like they own these habits. It still feels like a lot of effort, like they have to push themselves every single day. And that's the moment that I usually know that we need to stop focusing on the actions and start focusing on identity. Because the truth is, you can do all the right things. You can track your food, you can train consistently, you can follow the best meal plan, the best workout plan, you can work on your mindset, you can listen to all the self-development podcasts, and still feel like you're constantly fighting yourself. And the reason is simple. You're trying to step into your future self while still identifying with your current self. So by the end of this episode, you'll understand exactly why your current approach to transformation might be keeping you stuck. You'll learn the 3 levels of identity shifting that create permanent change. You'll know exactly how to actually embody your higher self through daily practical choices. And I'll walk you through the exact framework I use with my clients to make this shift not just theoretical, but real and lasting. Let me tell you about my client, Sarah. She's not actually named Sarah, but we'll call her Sarah for the purpose of this episode. She's one of my clients, and when she first came to me, she was already doing everything more or less right on paper. She was working out at the gym 4 times a week. She was tracking her nutrition. She was getting enough sleep. She was listening to loads of self-development podcasts, really into self-development and personal growth. But when she initially reached out, she said, I don't get it. I'm doing everything right, but it still feels hard. I still feel like I have to push myself every single day. And as a result of that, while her body was changing, it wasn't changing at the pace she wanted it to. And mainly, she just wasn't feeling fulfilled. She wasn't feeling happy in her routines, and she wasn't feeling like they were serving her the way that she knew that they were meant to, right? That was the moment I knew what was missing. So Sarah was trying to act like her future self, but she was still identifying as her current self. She was taking all the right actions, but deep down, she still saw herself as someone who struggled with consistency. Her core belief was that transformation had to be hard, that it had to require effort. And so, even though she was taking all the right actions, her experience of them was exhausting. This is where the 3 levels of identity shifting come in. The first level is the surface level, which is your actions. This is where most people focus. They try to change what they do without changing how they see themselves. Spoiler alert, this is why these things usually just don't stick. The second level is your self-concept. This is how you view yourself or your self-image. And the third, deepest level is your core beliefs. What you believe is possible for you. This exact shift happened to me in multiple areas of my life. So when I first got into strength training, I didn't really struggle with motivation, to be honest. I've always enjoyed working out, and it was never really something that I had to force myself to do. But there was this one thing that for years felt completely impossible for me. I always admired those people who would get up at 5 a.m. and smash a workout before the rest of the world even woke up. I remember looking at these people for years before I even had my son, when I had all the time in the world. And for some reason, I thought that that was impossible for me. So I used to tell myself, that's who I want to be. That's the level of discipline that I want to have. But at the same time, I was waking up at like 10 in the morning. At the time, I was a student. I'm an eternal student, by the way. As I said before, I'm just in the end of my PhD journey. But I've been in university for about 10 years. I did a lot of like teaching and researching jobs in university, but those were pretty flexible. So before I had my son, I would wake up at 10 a.m., right? Like that was normal for me, I guess. So I was the complete opposite of a morning person. I used to see people online talking about their 5 a.m. workouts and think like, there's no way I could ever do that. Like I so want to, but I'm just not built that way. I told myself I work best when I wake up late and I work best at night. That's when my brain works best. I accepted all of these things as facts. I told myself I was someone who trained in the afternoon, someone who needed slow mornings, someone who just physically couldn't get up early. Otherwise, I just can't function. That's what I used to tell myself. And that was my identity. Then I became a mom and everything changed. Suddenly, the way I structured my day wasn't just about me anymore. I had less time, a lot more responsibilities, and I knew that if I wanted to keep progressing in my training, something had to shift. And that's when I started doing the deep identity work that I now teach my clients. I stopped telling myself that I'm not a morning person. I stopped thinking of 5 a.m. workouts as something that was for other people or was so out of reach, and started asking myself, what would the higher version of me do? The version of me who was at her absolute best, who was thriving in every area of life. How would she show up? I knew that version of me trained early. I knew she didn't make excuses. She didn't waste time debating whether or not to get out of bed. She didn't spend hours scrolling on her phone as soon as she woke up. She just got up and did it. So instead of focusing on how hard it was, I started programming in this new identity. Every night before I went to bed, I reinforced the thought that I am someone who wakes up early and gets my workout in. Now, I didn't do it through affirmations. I didn't just look in the mirror and say to myself, I am someone who wakes up early. No, these things don't work for most people, and I have much deeper tools to really work on my subconscious mind and my clients' subconscious minds in order to really make those identity shifts stick, right? But I did all of that work, and every night before I went to bed, I would visualize myself jumping out of bed as soon as my alarm went off at 4:30 in the morning. I would literally, as I was like falling asleep, and that's when our brain is most susceptible to things that we want to create in our lives, I was just visualizing myself, the alarm going off and me jumping out of bed. And that's what would happen. I would wake up and I would have that visualization in my head and I would just do what I had visualized the night before. And the more I did it, it started to feel more and more normal. And now I wake up at 4:30 a.m. every single day. I never thought that would be possible for me. It used to feel completely out of reach, like something I just wasn't wired for, right? But the fun, cool thing is you can actually just rewire your identity. So even if there are things that you feel like are completely out of reach for you, that's just not true. You just have to do some rewiring, some deep subconscious identity work, and you can get there. And this applies to so much more than just training, right? So nutrition was another huge one for me as well. I've always had a sweet tooth. I still do, to be honest, but I just control it better. And for the longest time, I identified as someone who just didn't like healthy foods. I used to joke about how much I hated vegetables and how I could never be one of those people who actually just enjoyed eating fruit and veg, right? Eating salads. I still don't love salads, but I enjoy them a lot more than I did before. And that became my reality because when you tell yourself something enough times, your brain starts filtering for evidence that supports it. So every time I ate a vegetable and didn't love it, I reinforced the idea that I wasn't a healthy eater. Every time I craved chocolate or something sweet, I saw it as proof that I wasn't someone who could stick to a nutritious diet long term. At first, when I got into my health and fitness journey, I tried forcing myself to eat better. I told myself things like, I have to eat more vegetables, I need to stop eating so much sugar. But the more I framed it that way, the more it felt like punishment, right? Like something I was making myself do instead of something I genuinely wanted. And that's when I realized I needed to shift my identity. I stopped saying I have to eat healthy and started telling myself that I am someone who fuels her body for strength and performance. I stopped thinking of healthy food as something I had to force myself to eat and started seeing it as something that supported the strong, fit, high-performing version of me. And once I shifted my identity, everything else followed. I started actually enjoying whole nutrient-dense foods. I stopped seeing sugar as this thing I had to cut out completely and started naturally gravitating towards foods that made me feel good. And that shift didn't happen because I forced myself into it. It happened because I started to believe I was already the kind of person who ate that way. But the biggest identity shift I ever made was in my career. So I touched on it before, but I'm going to expand on it now. So for years, my entire identity was wrapped up in academia. I was a teacher, a researcher, someone who was in a very specific career path. And my whole sense of self was built around that. I also come from a family where they really, old fashioned. My grandparents, who I'm very, very close with. My grandfather passed away. My grandma is still here. Love her. But they both had that mentality of to be successful, you have to get like 1,000,000 degrees, right? So my whole sense of self was just built around that identity. So when I became a mom and decided to move into coaching, it wasn't just a career change. It was an identity crisis. I went from having a structured, respected career in academia with a clear path ahead of me to stepping into something completely new. A world where success wasn't guaranteed. A world where I had to put myself out there, where I had to be seen. I had to sell my services. And it completely shifted the way I even thought about work. And honestly, at the beginning, I struggled. I kept thinking, who am I to do this? Who am I to run a coaching business when I've spent my whole life in academia? What if I fail? What if people make fun of me? What if my family hates me for ditching this academic path after so many years? I was still seeing myself as an academic who was trying to be a coach instead of just owning the fact that I was a coach. That's what I was meant to be. And that's the thing about identity work. As long as you keep thinking of yourself as someone who is trying to do something, you will always feel like an imposter. And you will always fail. But the second you decide, this is who I am now, everything shifts. When I stopped seeing myself as an ex-academic trying to build a business and started identifying as someone who already ran a successful coaching business, I started showing up differently. Now, I'm talking to you about for the first year of my business, anyone who would ask me what I do, right? When you meet new people, they ask you what you do. I would always say, oh, I'm a PhD student and I teach in academia. And also I have this coaching business, right? I wasn't fully owning it. When I started doing this identity work, which also meant that I realized that I wasn't tying my self-worth and self-value to that academic position. Since then, whenever someone's asked me what I do, I would say I'm a coach. I wouldn't even mention being a PhD candidate. And again, that's when I started really showing up differently in my business and in my life. I started making decisions with confidence. I stopped second guessing everything. I stopped being worried that other people would judge me for what I do. And that's when my business actually started to grow. So, whether it's fitness, nutrition, business, or any other area of your life, the most important thing to remember is this: your transformation doesn't start with your actions, it starts with how you see yourself. You can force yourself to wake up early, to eat healthy, to take risks in your career. But if deep down you still see yourself as someone who struggles with those things, it's always going to feel like a battle. But when you shift your identity, when you start believing that you are the person who does these things effortlessly, everything gets easier. Now, if you're wondering, how do I actually make this shift? Here's the exact framework I use with my clients to make this transformation real and lasting. The first step is awareness. So I want you to identify the identity that's keeping you stuck. Take a few moments, a few minutes to ask yourself, maybe you want to journal about it. What labels am I attaching to myself that are limiting me? Are you telling yourself, I'm just not a morning person? Do you believe you always struggle with food? Do you believe I'll never be as successful as I want to be? Do you believe people don't want to hear what you have to say? So this is the foundation, because if you don't recognize the identity that's holding you back, you can't change it. Step 2 is reprogramming. I want you to choose and install a new identity. Instead of focusing on what you want to stop doing, shift the focus to who you want to become. Ask yourself, and again, you can journal about it as well: what would my highest self do if she was already thriving? If she had everything I want her to have, how would she move, think, and behave every day? What beliefs does she hold that are different from yours right now? You saw this in my own journey, right? Like when I stopped saying I'm not a morning person and started saying that I am someone who wakes up effortlessly and prioritizes my strength, my reality changed. When I stopped seeing myself as someone who hates vegetables and started seeing myself as someone who fuels her body for performance, my choices followed. When I stopped seeing myself as an academic who's trying this coaching business but is secretly kind of like embarrassed or like worried that people would judge her, and I started embodying this like badass coach that I am and that I knew that my higher version is, my business trajectory changed. I started getting so many clients and it started actually becoming successful. Okay, so this is the second step. The third step is daily reinforcement. And this is where a lot of people struggle, right? So I want you to embody your new identity through micro actions and micro moments every single day. This is where it becomes really real. Every single day, you have micro moments to prove your new identity to yourself. If your new identity is, I am a fit and disciplined woman, then today you move like her. The more you reinforce this, the faster it becomes second nature. Think about how you can embody that next level woman. Be her, do what she does, have what she has every single day. Even in the small things, right? I'm not saying, oh, my next level version is like super rich, so I'm going to go and buy a Chanel bag, right? But maybe it's, you know what, today I'm actually going to work from a coffee shop or like from a hotel lobby because I just want to feel like that woman who does these things. And of course, I have a lot of tools I use with my clients. So this is just a very general explanation, but there are much, much deeper tools that dive deep into your subconscious, your identity, and that make sure that this work isn't hypothetical, it's practical, and it's something that you can do every single day to rewire your subconscious mind and your identity fast. And there is actually this quote that I wrote on my phone. I saw it somewhere, and I think it just applies here really nicely. It's from the book Conversations with God. I've never actually read it, but I think I heard it on a podcast. It's by Neil Donald Walsh. And the quote goes like this: the deepest secret is that life is not a process of discovery, but a process of creation. You are not discovering yourself, but creating yourself anew. Seek, therefore, not to find out who you are, but seek to determine who you want to be. And this is what it's about. There's nothing that's out of reach for you. There's nothing that's impossible for you, as long as it's humanly possible, right? The difference or the gap between where you are now and where you want to go depends on this foundation of the deep subconscious identity work that can take you from where you are now, from the, identity that you have now, which, with all the love, you do want to divorce her because she brought you here, but she's still going to take you to the next level, right? So the gap between where you are right now and the identity that you need to embody to really take yourself to the next level, you create her. You create that woman, and she can really achieve absolutely anything. If this resonated with you and you want to go deeper into this work, there's a few ways that you can do this. Firstly, I invite you to join my free workshop where I teach this identity shifting process in depth. So check out the link in the bio for this workshop, which is honestly in half an hour to an hour, will completely change the way that you see yourself and will give you all the foundational tools to do this deep subconscious identity work. Then you can also work one-on-one with me. If you want to do that, you can check the link on my Instagram page or just DM me on Instagram at coach.shiri. DM me the word transform and I'll be in touch. And if you found value in today's episode, I would so appreciate it if you could just share it on your Instagram story and tag me at Coach Shiri. The first 5 women who will share this episode on their story will get a one-on-one session with me, 45-minute one-on-one session, completely free. As just saying thank you. Next week, we'll be diving into the exact training and nutrition practices for embodying your higher self. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. And remember, you're not just capable of transformation, you are worthy of it. Okay, until next time, bye. Thanks for listening.